Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at a knife that's sort of a blast from the past. This is the Brous Blades Silent Soldier Ranger V2. And back when Brous Blades first became a thing, before really he only had like one or two models out. But to my knowledge, this was probably the first model that really became a big deal, that people really started paying attention to him. And then shortly after came the division and the mini division, and then a number of other knives after that. But back then he was doing a pretty decent job, and these really put him on the map, and for good reason. I think the Silent Soldier, the original, by the way, didn't have this particular blade shape. It was sort of a more Warncliffe shape with a nice straight blade. And I had one. I really liked it. I liked carrying it, using it. But after, I don't know, a year or so, he brought out a number of versions. And one of the versions that he brought out was this one, the Ranger. And I liked this one a lot, so wanted to pick one up. And back then, so here was my plan. I thought, well, I'll sell the original version. I'll take that money and just buy the one I want. So I sold the original, but buying one of these turned out to be very, very difficult. Like it was so bad that you'd get an email notification from Brous Blades. I don't even know if I was on Instagram back then, but you'd get an email notification or find out some other way that, hey, their Ranger V2s for sale. And by the time you could go to the website, they'd all be gone again. They were really, really popular. And so I kind of gave up on it until, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, maybe 4 months ago, when I picked this up. And I noticed these were for sale on White Mountain Knives. By the way, there's still some in stock, or at least they were when I filmed this. I'm not sure exactly when this video will post. But I was able to, hit up Justin, get one of these, and I'm pretty happy that I did. I've wanted one for a long time, so it's kind of fun to finally be able to get my hands on one. And I will say I haven't been disappointed. I have used this one exactly the way I used to use the other one, which was always just clipped on my hip here, where it's kind of out of the way. I like to move it around my hip far enough that when I bend over, this is not in my way. And then I do sort of a cross draw to cut anything. And in that configuration, carried like this in the sheath, clipped over on my left-hand side, I really don't even notice it. And in fact, that can be a bit of a detriment, because there have been a number of days where it's the end of the day and I go to, take my pants off, get ready for bed, and I'm like, oh crap, there's my knife. So I'll, take it off at that time and throw it in my knife drawer. But it really is that unobtrusive that you don't even realize that you have it with you. So and the size and weight is a big part of that. So this is only 5¼ inches. It's 5¼ inches out of the sheath. It's only 1/8 of an inch longer, so 5 3/8 when it's in the sheath. The blade length here is just under 3 inches at 2 7/8. The handle length is only, wherever you measure from. So from here, you've got 2¼ inches. And the whole thing together, sheath and knife, weighs 3.7 ounces. So pretty easy to deal with in terms of an EDC. And I always carry it as a secondary EDC. So I'll still have my folding knife on me when I've got this most of the time. There will be the odd time, like I've got a couple of pairs of pants that have no pockets, just sort of track pants with no pockets. And or track pants with pockets that aren't suitable for a knife, and I'll clip this to the waistband, and even in that configuration, it still works really, really well. It's just easy to have with you. So that's the main thing that I like about it, is just the ease of carry and knowing you've got that extra tool on you if you were to ever need it. The other thing is it's very inconspicuous. I may as well deal with the carry stuff right now. I could maybe save this for the sheath discussion, but that's fine. It's quite inconspicuous. So carrying this on my left side, my shirt is usually covering it. Even if my shirt's tucked into a belt or something, this is not highly noticeable if you're wearing dark colors. And then when you're cutting with it, because of the way you hold it, like there's not a lot exposed here. So lots of times you can take this out, open the bag of gummy bears for your kid or whatever you're doing, make the cut you need, and no one even knows that you've got a knife out, and then put it back, and it's just really, really nice and easy to have, and very unobtrusive to keep with you. All right, now that I've talked about how this carries and why I like it for that reason, let's talk a little bit about This particular one, I do find this blade shape a little more versatile than the original Wharncliffe blade shape. And we've got a high flat grind here, D2 steel. It's actually pretty thin behind the edge, and we've got this nice clip point. I like the look of this as well. All right, I think it's, just the way it contours to your thumb, and the blade kind of follows the blade belly of the blade kind of follows the bend at the back of the blade there. I like the way this looks quite a bit, and I like the way it performs. That extra little bit of belly is nice. I had this, by the way, D2 steel, very well done D2 steel, and this one happens to be coated with that black coating, which is going to help a little with corrosion resistance, although even in satin, I wouldn't be that worried about it. Anyway, I had this the other day at fire training. I was cutting a bunch of straps for holding tools in place, and it worked great for that. I've cut up a bunch of cardboard, stuff like that. Now, the one thing probably you're not going to want to use this for is, cutting up an apple or something. One apple can get right in here. You don't have enough length here to do, to reach across most apples. And that's, I've made that complaint about other small knives before, but I don't do a lot of food prep, as I've often said with my EDC, so that's no big deal. For everything else, though, with your, whether you're cutting up cardboard or opening packages or anything like that, this has worked really, really well for me. I do like the edge geometry. Now, I will give this warning. When you're holding it with sort of the fullest grip you can, with your thumb up here, your finger through here, you do lose a certain amount of cutting ability because your fingers are in the way. When I was cutting straps, I would sort of cut on an angle like this, and it worked pretty well in that configuration. But you kind of, I don't know, for me, as I was using it, I just sort of naturally accommodated to keep my fingers out of the way and get the cuts made that I had to make. I do think it's pretty heavy duty little knife. We've got quite thick blade stock there. That's another thing I like about it. Maybe you're carrying a knife that day that you're not totally confident in terms of its ability to take a beating. So it's nice to have that other option. In terms of the grip, this is a 3-finger knife. I don't know if and it's definitely a different grip than most of the knives you've handled. It does put a lot of pressure. If you're doing really hard cutting, right, you got to think that finger is really a pivot point. And so to keep that from pivoting, you're going to put pressure on this finger here a little bit, not so much here, and on your thumb. So really, if you push down hard on something, you're going to be bearing most of that weight on your thumb and the rest of the weight on your index, on your middle finger here. And if, I don't know why you would with a knife of this size, but if you were gonna, I don't know, do some heavy whittling or cut up miles of cardboard, that would get to be fatiguing. Okay, but that's sort of the sacrifice you make for a smaller knife. If you're going to be doing some harder work, well, get the appropriate tool for the job is how I would simply respond to that. And you could adjust this. And by the way, Jason Brous did make a Silent Soldier flipper, many of you will recall, and I had that knife as well, and I enjoyed it. Not something I liked carrying as a primary knife because it doesn't have a lot of blade, but it was rather enjoyable. Would have been interesting to see how this one implemented into a folder, but that was never a thing. So the handle is definitely a little bit different and not what you're going to want for extended use. Okay, one of the things that they'll say about this is perhaps this is like a last ditch self-defense tool, and that could be if you're carrying a folder already. Maybe it's a certain amount redundant, but certainly, especially if you're skilled, no one's going to notice it very well. The retention is going to be very good. You're not going to drop this. No one's going to be able to take it away from you very easily. So there is that portion of the discussion to kind of think about as well. Let's move on now and talk about this sheath. The sheath is one of the things I like the most about this. I feel like it's pretty small, right? Perhaps we could take away a little bit up here, but because of that small size, that's what makes it so good and so easy to carry. The other thing I really like is just this simple folded over clip. I would like to see this on a lot more knives. I really would. I've got a knife here that I'll use for a comparison in a second where I'm like, yeah, if you could get that knife with a sheath like this, it would be off the charts fantastic. So you'll see what that is in a second. But I love this sheath. It's small, it's lightweight. The retention is very, very good, Okay, and part of that I think is, this is designed to potentially be a neck knife, and so you've got to, if this is going to hang upside down all the time, you've got to have good retention, and it does have really, really good retention. I love the way this clips to, my belt or the waistband of my pants. It just sticks right there, and yeah. And as I've said, even when I'm getting changed in the night, you won't even notice that you're wearing it, and then. As I, take my pants off at the end of the day, the knife just hangs right there on your pants. It doesn't, even when you're taking your pants off, it doesn't fall off. So it's really, really good for staying where you put it. I will give you just one comparison. I have a QSP here, and you can see the cutting edge is only a little bit longer on the QSP, but you can see how much bigger your average fixed blade is going to be. And yeah, I will say, if I was going to do a bunch of hard work, this is the knife I would want. Obviously, look at that handle, look at that, how comfortable it is. Yeah, of course, if I'm, I don't know, out in the bush getting ready to have a fire or something, I want this over this. But one thing I will say is the sheath for this knife is not good. Okay. I don't know. I'm still on the fence about whether I'm going to keep this long term or whether I'm going to let it go, or exactly what's going to happen with it. But I will say, if I decide to keep it long term, it's got to have a better sheath. And so that's one of the reasons I brought this in, is because this is such a fantastic sheath, and this is sort of a bit of a contrast for you. But then I wanted to give you an idea of, look, here's a pretty common EDC fixed blade size that demonstrates just how compact this knife really is. By the way, I have used this knife quite a lot because I don't like the sheath. I've been keeping it in my kitchen and using it for food prep and stuff. I love this knife. I think QSP has really done a great job here. So we'll get into that sometime when I do a full review of that, which shouldn't be too far in the future. All right, back to the Brous Blades Ranger V2. In conclusion, yeah, this is exactly how I remembered it. I remember loving the first one because it was just so easy to carry, so convenient, and I love this one for the same reason. It's virtually unnoticeable when you carry it. It's even hard to notice when you're using it because of its size and the way the handle kind of disappears into your hands. And in terms of EDCing a secondary blade, this is one of the best options that I'm aware of. I sometimes, rarely, but sometimes will carry two folders. I will fairly frequently EDC a fixed blade, but then I don't carry something extra. This is so small and so, it's so convenient that I find myself carrying this all the time. Even if I don't really think I'll need it, it's like, well, I may as well carry it because you really don't even notice it. And of course, you can get one from Justin over at White Mountain Knives, save yourself 10%. And I think they're like $100 these days. So, you get one for $90, and I think you're doing pretty darn well. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.